All right. Well, I'm Andy. This
I'm
is
Mark.
Mark. Here we are. And we're going to talk a little bit about understanding and communicating risk. Kind of got it broken up more or less into kind of like a three-act play, if you will. The first one we're going to talk about defining risk and how difficult it is to define what it is, what do we need to assess it, because that's always
Right.
important to be able to do. Act two is measuring risk real time.
Yep.
How good of a job do we do at understanding when it changes? Because we know that on most incidents or on a day-to-day basis in an organization, it's a constantly evolving level of risk.
And as humans, we have imperfect systems
Yeah.
to detect that.
Right. And then act three is knowing that that risk is going to change and that it's present. How do we become resilient?
Right.
And I think resiliency is important because we're not removing it. We're agreeing that it's there and we're agreeing that it's going to impact us. How do we be able to weather through that and see another day? So
Yeah, and I mean that's predicated on things that you've talked about before, which is acknowledging that this is a really dangerous environment.
Yeah.
Bad things are going to happen.
Correct.
Cannot eliminate that. And so I think that leads us into the introduction of this and maybe talk a little bit before the Act 1, 2, 3 about, what problem are we trying to solve when we talk about risk in this. And so that kind of comes to, I think, a kind of the universal connector, with my background as military and your background as a wildland structural firefighter. But have you ever been in that kind of situation where you're standing there and you're looking at this thing falling apart in front of you,
Right.
and you're just like, how did we get to this point?
right. And I think, yeah, for sure. And I think it always happens slowly. The one story I can think of is we were, a lot of people probably haven't driven around the North Dakota Badlands, but it's really soft ground. There's clay and everything else, and there's real tough two-track roads sometimes. Well, we were heading to a fire that was burning in a really inaccessible area. And as we drove a Type 6 engine in, the road was getting a little bit narrower and it was getting a little bit more difficult to navigate. And we kind of got to a point where we were going to be going around kind of an outside bank corner, and there was a pretty steep drop off, and there was a bump, and so you're going to be off camber. And we had gotten out and looked at it and really felt like we were doing a good job of assessing this.
Right. You're stopping. You're
Yeah,
not just
for
going.
sure.
Right.
Had somebody out kind of giving directions, and I was the driver, the unlucky guy, I guess, that got picked to be the pilot. And as we drove around it, we kind of hit the bump and kind of went through our plan of trying to gas around that corner a little bit. Well, what happened was the bank gave away and the engine slipped, and it kind of slipped a little more into the passenger side door, and eventually just real slowly ended up on its tail. And I felt like I was like getting ready to launch an Apollo mission,
Right.
So you're trying to crawl out of a vehicle, trying to push the door open and slide out, and got it shut off and everything. And I'm standing there up on what's left of the embankment, looking, 10 feet down at this engine that's on its tail. And yeah, it was the first thought in my mind is like, how did this happen? Like, how did we get to this point? But it happened slowly.
And it's a
and
series.
You're trying to do something.
Yeah. I mean, it's this series of judgments.
Yeah.
And I think all these things, you look in hindsight and you're just like, oh my gosh, it was there the whole time.
Yep.
And to me, I think that's as I observe both, wildland culture, structural firefighting, fire rescue culture, law enforcement, obviously my background from military special operations and, all the reading and so forth, to me, the biggest issue that we have in risk management is that it's all subjective. Anything at that tactical, certainly at that big strategic level, there are tools and data and quantification.
Right.
And quantification is the name of the game with risk. And everything at the tactical level is subjective.
Right. Yeah. No, it is. And you can't effectively manage something you can't measure objectively.
Yeah. And I mean, even the tools that we have, when you apply that matrix or that green, amber, red, or whatever those tools are, it's still asking you to.
Yeah, you could have a question on a structural fire: is the building structurally sound? Well, you could probably grab 5 random people and take them to that incident, line them up, and they might have 5 different opinions. So there's no way to measure that positively one way or the other.
Yeah, it's that subjectivity, and I think one of the biggest challenges. So the book I'm reading right now, and I'm just gonna put it up here, but it's called.
Mark's gonna do all the board work because I only.
Yeah, he's only got one wing, but this failure of risk management, and by Doug Hubbard. And now this is a geek's dream in risk management, so I would not, you really have
It's
to.
not light reading.
It's
right?
not light reading, but there's a couple of quotes that I think are really critical to our conversation. And so this book was actually published in 2009, and it was sped up because of the financial crisis. And he'd written a lot about the risks that were already existing. And so his publisher is like, hey, we need to get this out there because this is what you've been saying.
Right.
Right.
It's current.
Yeah. And so what really makes it current to me of why it's still relevant right now in 2020 is there's a quote on page 6 and 7 where he talks about major decisions that are being made with flawed methods. And he's like, here are just a few examples. Major risky decisions currently made with questionable risk assessment methods, and any of these could reveal themselves only after a major disaster. And then there's like 8 bullets. And 2 of the 8 bullets are the identification of supply chain risks due to pandemic viruses.
Oh my goodness.
And the other is the decision to outsource pharmaceutical production to China.
In 2009.
In 2009.
Looking ahead.
And so one of the things he says on page 102 is this concept of catastrophic overconfidence.
I think everybody has run into that concept at one time or another.
Yeah. Trying to write fast.
No,
and
yeah,
neat enough
you're
to
doing
be read.
great.
So, I'm just going to read his quote. Perhaps one of the most pervasive, exhaustively researched, and thoroughly confirmed phenomena discovered by judgment and decision-making psychologists is that almost everyone is naturally overconfident in their predictions.
Correct, right. And I think in emergency services especially so, because we're wired to be able to be like,
it's mission focused.
Right, I can go take care of that. We need to go take care of that. We need to go do that. Like that's how we're wired. But I think sometimes that we might be our own worst enemy with that.
Yeah, and I mean the body of research, of proof, of studies, of data, I mean it's just overwhelming, right?
Yeah.
And so, the reality is all the tools that we're using in emergency services, whatever that may be, in managing chaos, they're flawed.
Right.
They're subjective tools, and they just magnify our own human, tendency to underestimate the amount of risk.
So nobody's really going to change that reality anytime soon. It's really how we're wired. So
it's the environment, and it's who we are, and it's where we are, and it's what we do.
So the question is, how do we work with that reality, and how do we move forward and be resilient and be able to continue to make good risk decisions? Or maybe the answer is better risk decisions than what we do right now.
Yeah, better.
Right on.